The Cathedral of Hope, an LGBTQ plus affirming United Church of Christ in Dallas, Texas, is taking a stand against state sponsored targeting of drag queens and transgender individuals. The church recently held a service to bless drag queens and pledged to protect the rights to all people. While protesters outside expressed hatred, the congregation focused on love and radical inclusivity, recognizing that all individuals are made in the loving image of God. The service was a response to a law passed by Republicans that criminalizes drag performances. The church, determined to support its LGBTQ plus community, questions the law's application to religious services. Now, I'm going to go ahead and throw this back to our captain, MG. I have a lot of thoughts about this, but I'm going to go ahead and send it on back to you.
Well, thank you, Jellico, for sending it back to me. I did want to say this one thing before I throw it out to the rest of the panel. I just want to just give some quick reactions about this story because I was trying to figure out where to go with it. I think that um, I got that same feeling from actually like reading some of you guys' notes as well, as far as like what direction do we go with this story. Um, I know for me, on one hand, the church is an ally to LGBTQ plus communities and
Mm-hmm.
using their voice to speak out against horrible laws that make drag performances finable to a minor who happens to see a performance. And we all know that this is just to curtail drag story hour.
Yep.
We know this, okay? But on the other hand, the people who are behind the bill are other Christians or another form of Christians.
Mm-hmm.
So one group feels justified to stand for the marginalized as they would see it fits in Jesus's teachings, and while another uses the same book to justify hate. And I think my dilemma lies in that the book can be used to do both.
Mm-hmm.
So, our Lord and Savior, Pharaoh, may you so ever be reigning. What were your
Well,
thoughts when you
thank
actually
you.
read this?
Well, I was a little bit offended, first of all, because today is the first time in my life I've ever worn eyeliner. I just realized that. And
Oh,
so
wow.
to to
Congratulations.
thanks
It's good
to
look. I
oppress.
think you should stick with it.
Yeah, I do too.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I feel like I can somewhat relate now. I would not want to be marginalized for my choices or for what makes me feel good. And of course, I consider myself an ally to a community that just wants to be themselves. In deciding where to go with this article, I wanted to take the positive approach because I
Mm.
think it's important to recognize that this church is in fact legit. And unlike some of their more Christian counterparts, for the Pope is the best example I could think. They are not ambiguous in how they
Mm-hmm.
feel or what their goals are. They are well defined, they are steadfast, and they are not afraid to show that, as opposed to maybe some churches or the Pope who say, well, maybe there's a way that we can bless gay unions. Maybe
Mm.
we should be a little bit more tolerant, of trans people, but never actually making it a policy or never actually
Mm-hmm.
following through on anything that's concrete that we can point to and say, wow, there is real progression here. But not
Super
only is
agreeable.
this church what I think representative of is progress, but so is their hierarchy, the upper echelons under who they fall on. So they are, I don't know if in this denomination you'd consider them a diocese of some other archdiocese, but they do fall under, I would say, the hierarchy of the United Church of Christ. And when looking
Right.
in looking there, I also saw the same messaging. And I
Hmm.
think that this is important messaging. Could there be a hidden agenda? Sure. But I don't really get that feeling right now. And even so, I think this relationship is one that's worth fostering. And it's the kind of message that our youth, especially in places more akin to hate speech and bigotry and anti-LGBTQ assaults, they should be exposed to and even become used to.
Hmm. Hmm.
So
Yeah.
yeah, those are my initial thoughts. Thank you for the opportunity to express that.
Yeah, and Pharaoh, I'll be right back. I need to go ahead and move your brick to build your pyramid. But before I do that, I want to hear if I can just go back, Jason, since you introduced the article, and I know that you're a friend
Hmm.
and an ally to
Hmm.
drag queens.
Oh
What were
yeah.
your thoughts when you actually read this?
Well, I mean, of course, I want it to be a positive thing, and I have
Mhm.
to echo what the Lord and Savior was saying that, yeah,
Yes.
I mean, they're taking a stand and all that good stuff. But
Mhm.
being a person who enjoys going to drag night and who does some drag every once in a while, I can't help but think to myself, I'm like, well, what's their motivation behind this?
Mm.
And it may be virtuous, it may be this thing, but I'll tell you what, that's some good press for them, right? And with the waning relevance of religion in the West, or namely United States, um, attendance is down.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So you have a queer community who traditionally has to fight real hard to even be community. You don't have monuments built to queerdom, where you can all go form in groups and sing songs about being queer. So it would make sense that, as churches always do, you are marketing to those who are in need.
Mm.
So in a place like Dallas, Texas, where you have a bunch of racist, homophobic people, and it's if anything, a hornet's nest for Christian nationalism,
Mm.
one could reasonably conclude that the church was just doing some good marketing. Bad press is the best press. We know this. I know this from playing in bands. So they're getting some protesters outside. Now then they get a news story. Now we're talking about it, right?
Yeah.
So again, while any allyship is good, I question the motivation, and not to mention the fact that I don't want anybody in those four walls. But that's
Mm.
because I'm an anti-theist. So
Mm.
my views may not represent all y'all's. I'd rather just see that place shut down or turn into a homeless shelter. Or you really want to help some people, make that a refuge for queer youth who have lost their places of residence and their families and their communities because of religious trauma and bullshit like this. Then you'd
Mm.
actually be doing something instead of having all those pay your fucking taxes. Yeah,
Mm.
I don't know. That would be real time help. Maybe I'm
Mhm.
jaded. Maybe, I don't know. Maybe
Mhm.
I'm a fucking pessimist, but that's kind of how I feel about it. So I'll throw it back to you, MG.
It's not it's not without warrant or merit of what you're saying. We know that traditionally, on a larger scale, that the church has been very instrumental of being oppressive to people who don't present in
Yeah,
traditional manners.
it,
Yeah. So, yeah,
it,
go
it's
ahead.
like it's like somebody in a Nazi uniform going to a soup kitchen to feed Jewish kids. It's like,
Mm,
look, I'm being so nice to these Jewish kids. Look at how nice I'm being while wearing a fucking swastika. I mean, that's I mean, that's how I
do,
feel about it because they have
do you
conversion
think that
camps.
was like, do you think that, I mean, but like using that particular example, do you think that's a bit, you know,
No, I don't
overinflated?
because
Mm,
Christians kill queer people because Christians this year have put forth over 500 plus articles of legislation to try to fucking destroy us. So no, I don't see it as dramatic. I see it
mm,
as a systematic just demoralization and a way to remove human rights that every human should have, especially in these nations. I was born on this
Yeah.
soil that gives me the right to have these rights. You're
mm,
taking it away from me. You are my enemy. So no, I
mm,
don't see it as any different. I don't see it as dramatic. Being a queer person
mm,
and being a Jewish person, I don't see
mm,
any false, equivocation. But that's me.
mm.
Yeah. How
You
do
got
you
a
know when
point.
it's safe? How do you know
Mm,
when it's safe to let your guard down and trust somebody who has nothing but a
Yes,
track record of complete devastation?
yes, that's what
yeah,
I'm
I
saying.
understand that.
Yeah.
I understand.
yeah.
Yeah.
Hmm.
I think that, and then I'm sorry, class. Kelley, I am going to bring you into the conversation.
All right, I'm
But
anxiously waiting here.
yeah, I know. Just to keep on simmer in the moonlight, or right there you go. Simmer and bask in Ramesses glory. Um, I can definitely empathize with those statements. It's kind of like I get baffled at the sheer numbers of African Americans who are Christian.
Yes, thank you. I didn't want to say it,
Yes.
but
No, that's okay. I said it for you.
thank you.
I mean, for like we talked about, like that a couple days ago about Robert P. Jones,
Mhm.
and he wrote the book White Too Long, and also his new book, and I mentioned it again, like the hidden roots of white supremacy. And I know specifically in White Too Long, he talked about the history specifically of the second largest denomination in America, the Southern Baptist Convention, and how first off they were formed in order for them to continue the institution of chattel slavery in America, because they had a division with the North. With the growing numbers of abolitionists that were coming out of northern states. And you also had those who happened to be prominent pastors and elected officials who were also very vocal about Black people in general uh, being demeaned and delineated by the Lord, God, Jesus, whatever,
Mhm.
as forever to be servile to white
Yep.
people.
Yep.
So, and I get that uh, in African American populations using the church as a way to organize and even fight back or what have you, but I think that the only reason why they did is because that's all that was really available at that time, because like the only places that a lot of them was able to even gather is in churches or even be able to worship away from white people.
Mhm.
So there's that dichotomy. But now that we are here and we know this history and we are quite familiar with how, even now, as you mentioned, Jason, that people are sitting in seats where they are using their Christian belief and slapping it on with patriotism to come up with archaic and horrible laws that oppress they oppress Black people. I can think about like laws to push revisionist history when it comes to Black American history, also LGBTQ people, trans people, and also those who may even try to come over here for a better life. So it's it I can definitely see your point of where you're coming from. So and I said all that to say is that I empathize. So
Mhm.
classic Kelley, what were your thoughts? Were they empathetic? Were they not? Were they antithetical? What say you?
Seriously, you want me to follow that? I knew this was going to be a segment that I was just going to shut up and listen and hear the experience of my fellow nonprofits. But it was. I'm glad I'm not the only one that struggled with this particular uh, topic here. When I was writing out some notes for the show, I was literally flip flopping like every other sentence I was writing, and I think what it boils down to is, on one hand, this is a relatively positive outcome. I mean, if you look at it on the small scale, right, we have the church whose and their religious beliefs could very easily be setting them up to be foes, or at least overt foes. Okay.
Mhm.
But they have a strong sense of what's right, and they're standing up for a marginalized community. And so there's honor in that. There's hope in that. I can see the love. And it's really hard to frown on that kind of thing, so you have to give kudos where kudos are due. Having said that, they're not addressing the real issue here. They still are a religious organization. They still are embracing irrational beliefs that do sometimes lead people to the hate side of the spectrum. You know, you hear this quote often on atheist shows from Voltaire saying, those who can make you believe absurdities can make you commit atrocities. And
Yeah.
so having good intentions or having a strong sense of what is right rather than what's being told to you is right is not always enough. And so by leaving the door open a crack for those irrational beliefs, you kind of leave the door vulnerable for the more extremist groups. And so I think where I finally ended on this story is that I wanted to give myself permission to be happy with the one step that this is making, a step in the right direction, right? And so I
know about you start singing.
I think it's okay to feel positive about that step while still looking at the path ahead of us, where we see that there's long distance to go. You know, we have a long way to go before we can shake this particular problem off of our back. And so, it was interesting for me. I'm relatively privileged in this country. I've never had to worry. I've never had an existential threat over my head like Jason was talking about. I don't have to worry about society rejecting me because of my gender identity or my sexual identity. That's just not it's not something that I have to deal with or that I have to experience firsthand. And so rather than try to wrap my head around that, I can at least recognize the fact that I don't know what it's like, and so that I can do something like sit on a panel with some friends who have a different perspective. And I think that I think cautious optimism as far as this particular church goes, and I think learning when to shut up and listen as far as Kelley / Scott is going here, knowing when to just let somebody else share their experience. I don't have to keep talking. And on that note, I just want to point out that I harvested this beauty here in Peru in 1723. This is a Bigfoot claw embedded in solid fugasium, and so very valuable. If you find one of those, make sure you hold on to it. And so, sorry, MG, I didn't mean to get us off track
It's
there, but let me pass it back to you there.
It's okay. Mind
But hey, what the fuck? It's just a buck, right?
It's just a buck. That's all.
Right.
Right. That rock is just a buck, people. And if for free, for 99 cents, you can own Bigfoot's claw and whatever.
Fugasium.
And Fugasium. I know.
Yeah.
I was like, whatever the fuck that shit is. You trigger me. You taking me back last week. Anyway, I wanted to say something specifically that I heard from another YouTuber that sometimes I listen to. And one of the things that they mentioned is that in order for any of us to really be able to turn back egregious laws, you need allies. And is it okay to look at this church as allies, to be able to possibly turn back, like the article mentions, these crazy fines that they're going to be, I believe it's $10,000 if a minor happens to see a drag show, or
right. That's how they described sexually explicit performance. I mean, seriously?
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, like, so, and of course, of all of us is like, really, like, come on now. Like, I even remember like watching fucking Mr. Rogers back in the day, and like all types of, puppets and people would dress up and tell stories and dance and all this other stuff. The only difference is that they may have, dressed up and comported to their own identifying gender. Right. But if it was like the opposite, then all of a sudden people like are in arms, even though that the content that was being presented was geared to children, right? So I don't know. I think I'm just all over the place with this, guys. I'm so sorry. But going back to my my question, allies, this particular, church, to the LGBTQ community. What are your thoughts? Jason, please go.
For risk of making enemies, I don't want to see one queer person in those four walls at all. I
Fair,
think I
fair.
think we are I think we are placating the people who have oppressed us and
Mm,
who continue to work to oppress us. And we are more or less, it's almost like a trauma response to an abuser. We're just so happy that they're finally being nice to us
mm,
that, oh, thank you, sir. I'm sorry you hit me so hard. I mean, no. So I can't, and it's hard because I have friends who are religious, but they know where I stand
sure.
and they know where I stand and they know how I feel about it. And I think it's ridiculous. And I
Mm,
think giving any credence to something that is so fucking incoherent and ridiculous as any Abrahamic God to me is just setting yourself up to take in more bad feelings about yourself and then put those bad feelings onto somebody else and legislate according to them, much like we have. We start to see. I don't know. I want to have allies. I can have allies with people. I can't have allies with. I can't be an ally with an organization. Sorry.
fair, fair. Ramses, son of God,
Yes.
or God of Sun.
Yeah.
Your thoughts?
God, the God of the Son is Amun, and I would never
Mm-hmm.
blaspheme
Mm,
against him. But
mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
um, you know, Jason, at risk of potentially making an enemy of you, although I don't think that would happen. And while I understand where you're coming from, I think you know I have a different perspective, and I want to posit this and just hear me out, right? So I as a white man, right, I understand that I'm part of a system that has benefited me greatly, right? And other people have not experienced that benefit. And I've also kind of felt a little bit of guilt. I mean, it's too bad, right? That people can't, be subject or be receive the same kind of benefits that I can count on, right? And I almost I don't want people to look at me as the same kind of oppressor that my ancestors were,
Yeah.
if they even were. I don't know. I don't think we had any slaves or anything in my family lineage, but it doesn't mean that they didn't also benefit from a society that was geared towards helping white people.
Mm-hmm.
And so I don't want to be categorized as those people. And so I feel like me moving forward and stepping away from hopefully uh, this kind of oppressive nature that white Christians have grown up in, and I was a Christian at one point, right?
Mm-hmm.
Maybe I could separate myself from that, and I would like to see us move in a direction where more organizations that are typically affiliated with committing atrocities want to say, "Hey, I don't want to commit atrocities. Like this is seriously not what I want to do." And
Mm-hmm.
I don't feel like we can really get there without at least seeing the shimmering shine of hope, right? The glimmering shine of hope there. I'm affiliated, so we have mentioned that I am in the military, right? But I am also a assistant college professor, and I work at different colleges, and one of them in particular I was really hesitant to work with because they are a college, a Catholic institution, but they've been dropped from the National Labor Relations Union for their religious status. They just opened a wonderful brand new Pride Center. They've got groups for Muslim student groups, and so I'm starting to see this conversation maybe take hold a little bit more, and
Mm-hmm.
and I want to see that continue. So hopefully that makes a little bit of sense.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Rockman, what about you? What say you?
That's me.
Mm-hmm.
No, actually, Ramses, you just perfectly set up what I wanted to say. And I think I think if we take the mile high view of this, what we're seeing is, regardless of how we're interacting with the people involved here, what we're seeing is uh, religious a religious organization pulling away from hateful rhetoric, and obviously there's plenty of distance to go here, and it's hard to, it reminds me of that old analogy, yeah, okay, you give me a sandwich with just a little bit of dog shit in it, or a sandwich with a lot of dog shit in it. Yeah, it's better to have a little bit of dog shit in it, but that's still not a sandwich I want to eat, right? And so, but if we look at it from the Mile High view, we see that there is movement, there is motion on a grand scale. I found and I'm not going to read the study here, but I found a Pew Research study. I'll put a link in the show notes. But they were showing that even among religious groups, and this was, I believe it was just American religious groups that they were looking at here, there's been an increase in acceptance of the LGBTQ community. And now, it's very easy to say that that's just lip service or whatever, but at least it's better than nothing, right? And so there, and some of the groups showed over a 10 or 12% increase in the acceptance rates over, and they looked over a 7-year period, 2007 to 2014. So just within that time period, there has been, at least according to this study, there has been some shift in attitude, and I choose to hope on that. And I it's hard to say if we're going in the right direction. But like I said before, at least we're doing a step in the right direction. So we'll see how the rest of the journey takes us. And on that note, me talking about a step in the right direction, I'm going to pass it right off back to MG here.
Well, I'm going to step in the right direction and say, Jason, I feel you wholeheartedly. And I've already said why, but I will say this. And this is just in general, allies don't mean friends.
That's true.
Allies don't mean friends. It's just, and thank you. Thank you.
We have a
darling.
special guest, ladies and gentlemen.
Yes. Thank you, darling, for coming in as I'm giving my wrap up. But I will say this, that if we're going to keep it 100% real, it's the church that has perpetuated a lot of hate, and they've done it to a lot of marginalized communities. And perhaps it's those in the church that have a great responsibility to speak out and work actively against hate. Yes. You say so too? Yes. To actually say no more. But we don't want you, dear viewer and listener, to say no more. So if you want more from us and the nonprofits in general, click here.